Hello bass lovers! Welcome to a new video. Today I would like to talk about an interesting topic. We will talk about right hand technique. This is something really common as bass player because who came from upright bass simply translate this movement into this movement, or maybe who come from the classical background type of technique go to, well, you know, bass doesn't have to be played with a pick because it isn't technically a proper guitar, so we play with finger because of his double bass ancestralness, because many times we start playing in a certain way or with a certain style and we stick to that without exploring the infinite amount of possibilities that this instrument offers. In this video I would like to talk about the three styles, different approach, different sound, and it's not like, well, I'm going to fix it later with a pedal effects or with a plugin or with EQ setting on my amplifier. Sometimes certain things and certain intentions come way above our effects chains or plugin chains or whatever you want to use. This is just with our right hand. It all starts from here, literally. Well, it technically starts from our brain that sends the impulse, but you know what I mean. So the first fingerstyle approach I would like to talk today is the classical one. The thing that I think most of us really use on a regular basis, which is the anchored fingerstyle technique. Basically, we use our thumb as a fulcrum, and it's the classical way of playing. For example, thumb on the pickup, two fingers alternating each other, or doing, you know, the typical stuff that we use as bass player. What are the advantages and the disadvantages of this type of approach? Well, a big advantage of this technique is that it allows us to have a stable position while we're playing all our stuff, because this is a fixed point that we choose, and the most common is the finger over the pickup, but sometimes you see a lot of players that place their thumb right above the string, for example. So look closely at my wrist and see how the thumb really helps to have a fixed point, and it really helps to have a defined sound. And this is the classical way of playing. I think most of us playing with this style because it feels secure, it feels solid, it feels logical. The disadvantages of this type of playing style, well, the first disadvantage is that if we are going to play extended range instruments like 5 or 6 or 7 strings, you name it, bass guitars, we have some problem because other strings might resonate. If we're going to play solo stuff, for example, even on a 4 string, if we don't pay enough attention on the notes that we are going to play, we can have unwanted noises or resonances because this is the anchor point, see? But I don't have any control on the notes or the strings that are in between these notes. For example, if I'm gonna play the G strings, I'm gonna play a G on the 12th fret, and my finger is on the pickup, and I'm gonna start to play. Okay, now my technique suggests to stop the unwanted noise in combination with the left hand. But what if I forget to use my left hand to help this type of right hand approach? Listen to how many resonances and unwanted noise comes into place. Can you hear it? Again. Can you hear it? So, if I want to use the anchor point on the pickup, for example, I really have to pay attention not just to my right hand, but also to my left hand, because it helps to prevent unwanted noise and resonances and, you know, that kind of little sounds that we don't want in our performance or in our recording situation. But despite this fact of resonances and you have to really dig in with the left hand to control and avoid unwanted noises, I think this is by far the most common and most used right hand approach with bass guitar, and there's a solid reason for it. I mean, literally, the thumb is the most solid finger that you can have to play with your right hand. Alright, the second hand approach with your bass guitar is the floating thumb technique. As the name suggests, it's basically like we have our hands flowing in the air just above the strings. The main advantage of this technique, I'm gonna show you right now. Okay, the main advantage of this technique is that, your thumb basically acts both like an anchor point and like a mute. If I'm going to play melodic stuff like this, silence. And I also go off with my left hand. So this is a great approach if you play 6 or 5 or 7 string, extended range instruments, because it basically takes charge of most of the muting needs. And this is great because it also helps to have a relaxed playing, because your palm is basically anchored with your forearm on the instrument, so you don't have this kind of action. With the right hand anchor approach, sometimes many people play with really narrow angle between their wrist and their palm of their hands, and sometimes some people could make a career out of it. Some people find it fatiguing, and it's not for everyone. You have to find what's comfortable for you. One of the great advantages of the floating thumb technique is that helps a lot to avoid wrist pain or fatigue and consequential problems, because you basically have almost a straight line. You can also change the angle of the wrist to your preference, because the tone also changes with this type of technique, because we have a really straight approach on the string instead of a inclined approach. And so listen the difference if I move just my wrist a little bit on the sound, on the envelope of the note. Listen how the angle of my wrist is going to change the timbering characteristic of the note. In this way the sound is full, but if I'm going to slightly go on this way with my wrist, definitions comes in and I've got less low end on my fingers. Could you hear the difference? And my thumb, as you can see, is always on the top of the strings. Muting is never on top of the pickup, is never in a single point, is moving along with my hands. I really love this approach on the right hand, because I think personally is one of the most versatile approach, because it lets you play basically all the types of bass. It doesn't matter what shape the pickups are or at what height the pickups are, because sometimes when people are really used to play with the thumb over the pickup, if you change that surface, Some people may not find it comfortable, but with the floating thumb, you basically are going to solve that problem because your thumb is always on top of the string. It doesn't matter what type of surface is beyond the strings because you are not going to touch it with your thumb. So I really like this technique. The main disadvantage of this technique, because every technique has its own advantages and disadvantages. The main disadvantage of this technique, at least for me, is that it requires a little bit of expertise to be played, because the first approach that we have seen is definitely the more practical, because you have an anchor point, and this is your solid point of reference for playing your instrument, for playing with your right hand your instrument. Now, with this approach, things get more complicated, because you really have to know your instrument and to have that kind of confidence and trust. But otherwise you surpass the beginner phase. I really suggest to learn and use this technique, because especially in the studio environments when clean playing is required, is really a time saver. So the third and last technique I would really like to talk today, I think it should sound familiar to the metalheads and heavy bangers out here, is the heavy approach, the hammered approach, the forearm on the body, and the claw approach. You name it in many different ways, whatever you want. But it basically is when we use our right hand with more like of a percussive and attacking intention, and it's great for heavy genres of music. And I think every bassist should know how to use this technique, because sometimes it really helps to cut through a mix, especially on rock, hard rock, metal, and all the heavy related genre. Even if you're playing pop music or hip hop or jazz music, it really is a useful tool at your disposal, just with your right hand. And you just have basically to modify a little bit your intention on the strings you are hitting, because if on the classic approach we are going to hit the string like this, a round envelope, a round sound, with this approach, it will sound like this. Okay, now in this groove, of course you might prefer the first rounder R&B Motownish sound, but if we're going to play a heavy driven groove, for example, like a heavy metal bass line, can you hear the difference? For example, also with a simple feel like this. Can you hear the energy that comes alive out of the instrument? Woo! It's great because you are not using any effects or compression on anything fancy. You are just modifying the approach. Instead of pulling the finger gently in your direction, you are basically going to just hit it a little bit and also move to the end part of your finger to have the attacky tone, because the more meat you get, the more beefy tone you're gonna have. This is the mantra of bass tone in 3 seconds. Again, this technique is great because maybe also with soloing, sometimes you just want to have that ragey, growly sound out of your instrument, and it's great. Why don't learn it and use it? It's here. It's for you. It's basically free. You just have to practice and find your way to do it. So again, we discussed about 3 ways you can use your right hand on the instrument. Here's a little recap for you. Anchor thumb style. The floating thumb style. And the heavy hitter type of approach. So that's it for this video. You can check out the link below if you want to support or listen to my music or have more information about me. My name is Pier Piras. Thanks so much for having this time with me, and I hope to see you in the next video. Have a wonderful time!